The night the orphan sister and brother ran. The sky had no moon, only a thick, choking darkness that seemed to press down on the crooked building they called an orphanage. It squatted at the edge of the town like a rotten tooth, its windows barred, its walls stained with years of cruelty and silence. Inside, children learned early not to cry too loud, not to hope too much, and never, ever to trust the owner. A man whose kindness was a mask worn only in daylight. After sunset, his voice turned sharp as broken glass, and his footsteps down the corridor meant pain, hunger, or worse. The sister, barely 12, had memorized every creak in the floorboards, every shadow on the wall, every lie she told herself to survive. Her brother, only 7, slept curled against her like a frightened kitten, his small fingers clutching the torn edge of her dress as if she were the last solid thing in a world that kept crumbling. That night the man came drunk again. His shouting echoed through the halls, followed by the sound of something breaking, maybe a chair, maybe a child's spirit. The sister felt her brother flinch even before the door slammed open. She wrapped an arm around him, whispering the same promise she always did, the one she barely believed herself anymore. "I won't let him take you, I swear." When the footsteps moved away, laughter trailing behind them, she knew something inside her had snapped. Fear was no longer enough to keep her still. Staying meant losing her brother piece by piece. Leaving meant danger, but at least danger had a chance. She had been planning this escape for weeks, collecting crumbs of courage like stolen bread. A loose nail behind the laundry shed, a fence panel weakened by rust, a sack hidden beneath the floorboard with 2 pieces of dry bread and an old tin cup. When the orphanage finally fell silent, except for snores and distant wind, she gently shook her brother awake. His eyes opened wide, terror flooding them until he saw her face, steady despite the pounding of her heart. "We're going," she whispered. "Now." He didn't ask where. He didn't cry. He only nodded because even at 7, he knew the difference between a nightmare and something worse. They moved like ghosts through the yard, bare feet biting into frozen dirt. The night air was sharp, slicing through their thin clothes, but neither made a sound. When the fence scraped her arm and drew blood, the sister clenched her teeth so hard her jaw ached. Pain was nothing. Pain was familiar. What terrified her was the idea of turning back. When they finally slipped through the gap and ran, the orphanage loomed behind them, dark and angry, like a beast realizing its prey had escaped. She didn't look back. If she did, she might lose the strength to keep running. They followed no road at first, only instinct. Away from the lights, away from the town, away from every place that had ever hurt them. The fields stretched endlessly, whispering with dry grass and unseen creatures. Her brother stumbled more than once, and each time she lifted him, whispering stories of places where children laughed freely and no one shouted at night. She didn't know if such places existed, but her brother needed to believe they did. So maybe she did too. Hours passed, or maybe only minutes, it was impossible to tell. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, fear pressed on their chests, and the cold seeped into their bones. At one point the boy began to cry silently, tears streaking his dirt-smudged face. "I'm scared," he whispered. The sister knelt in front of him, holding his face in her hands. "I know," she said softly. "I am too. But we're together. That means we're not lost." She didn't know if that was true, but she needed him to hold on to something stronger than fear. The unknown path stretched ahead, darker than anything behind them. Every sound, a snapping twig, the howl of distant wind, made her heart leap. She imagined the orphanage owner chasing them, his rage hot enough to light the night. She imagined being dragged back, punished not just for escaping but for daring to hope. Her grip on her brother tightened. If that happened, she would fight. She didn't know how, but she would. She had already decided that this night, no matter what, she would stop being only a child. Just before dawn, exhaustion finally claimed them. They collapsed beneath a cluster of trees, the sister pulling leaves and her thin shawl around her brother, shielding him from the cold. She stayed awake, eyes burning, listening to the world breathe around them. In the pale grey light, she realized how small they were. 2 fragile lives swallowed by something vast and unforgiving. The fear returned, heavier now. "What have I done?" she thought. "I don't know where we're going. I don't know if anyone will help us." And yet, as the first weak sunlight filtered through the branches, something else stirred, something she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't safety. It was possibility. The orphanage was behind them. Whatever waited ahead couldn't be worse than staying. She brushed her brother's hair from his eyes as he slept, and in that quiet moment, she made another promise, not whispered this time, but carved into her heart. "I will find us a place to belong, even if I have to walk until my feet bleed, even if the path is unknown." She didn't know that the path would soon cross with a man on horseback, a cowboy with a weathered face, tired eyes, and a loneliness as deep as the open land. She didn't know that fear would give way to trust, and trust to something neither of them dared imagine yet. For now all she knew was that they were free, and that was enough to keep walk. The sun climbed slowly, pale and hesitant, as if even daylight was unsure whether it was welcome in this forgotten stretch of land. The sister woke with a sharp ache in her back and a deeper ache in her chest. For one terrifying second, she thought the night had been a dream and that the orphanage walls would rise around her again. But then she felt the cold earth beneath her palms, heard the wind moving freely through the trees, and saw her brother still sleeping beside her, curled tightly, alive, untouched by shouting or fists. Relief washed over her so fiercely it almost made her dizzy. She shook him gently. "We have to keep moving," she whispered. He groaned, rubbing his eyes, confusion clouding his face until memory returned. Fear followed instantly. "Are they coming?" he asked. She scanned the horizon, her heart racing. Nothing but fields, trees, and distant hills. "No," she said, forcing certainty into her voice. "Not today." She helped him to his feet, tearing one piece of dry bread in half. It was hard and tasteless, but he ate as if it were a feast, crumbs clinging to his lips. Watching him, she felt a fierce, painful love swell inside her. Whatever happened next, she would not regret this choice. They chose a direction that felt right, toward the open land where the sky seemed wider, where fewer people might recognize them. The road they found was barely a road at all, more a suggestion pressed into the dirt by time and hooves. Each step took them farther from everything they knew and deeper into uncertainty. The sister's legs trembled with exhaustion, but she kept her pace steady, counting steps in her head, pretending it was a game. The brother followed closely, sometimes holding her hand, sometimes skipping stones to distract himself from hunger. As the hours dragged on, the world grew harsher. The sun warmed their backs, but the wind stayed cold, sneaking under their clothes. Their stomachs twisted with hunger again. They passed no houses, no wagons, no friendly signs of life, only endless land that didn't seem to care whether 2 children crossed it or vanished within it. Fear crept back, quieter now, but heavier. What if no one ever comes? She thought. What if this path leads nowhere? By midday, the brother began to slow. His steps faltered, his shoulders sagged. When he finally sat down in the dirt and refused to stand again, she felt panic flare. She knelt in front of him, brushing dust from his face. "Just a little farther," she begged softly. "Please." His lower lip trembled. "I can't," he whispered. "I'm tired." She looked around helplessly, the vastness suddenly crushing. She had imagined danger as something loud, a man chasing them, a hand grabbing her arm. She hadn't prepared for this quiet kind of threat, the slow wearing down of hope. She gathered him into her arms, even though he was heavy and her muscles screamed in protest. Each step was agony, her breath coming in sharp gasps, but she refused to stop. She told him stories as she walked, stories about brave children who crossed deserts and forests and were rewarded with homes full of warmth and laughter. He rested his head against her shoulder, listening, trusting her with a faith that both strengthened and terrified her. She was his entire world now. If she failed, there was no one else. The path curved toward a low stretch of hills, and it was there that the sky began to change. Clouds rolled in, thick and gray, swallowing the sun. The wind picked up, howling across the open land, carrying with it the scent of rain, or worse, a storm. She tightened her grip on her brother, her heart pounding. A storm out here, with no shelter, could be deadly. She scanned the land desperately, eyes stinging with tears she refused to let fall. Then she saw it, a weathered barn in the distance, leaning slightly as if tired of standing. Hope flared so suddenly it hurt. She stumbled toward it, half running, half falling, until the structure loomed before them. The door hung crooked, but inside it was dry. She set her brother down gently, collapsing beside him as thunder rumbled in the distance. Rain soon followed, pounding against the roof like an angry drum. They huddled together in the dim light, the sister wrapping her arms around him, whispering reassurances she desperately needed herself. As the storm raged, fear returned in a new form. What if someone finds us here? She thought. The orphanage owner's face flashed in her mind, twisted with rage. She imagined him riding up, dragging them back. Her body tensed, ready to fight or run. But no one came. Only the rain, only the wind, only the long hours stretching endlessly forward. When the storm finally eased, the world felt washed raw. The air smelled clean, almost kind. The sister stepped outside cautiously, scanning the horizon. That's when she saw movement, a shape against the fading clouds. At first, she thought her tired eyes were playing tricks on her. But then the shape grew clearer, a horse, and on it a man. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere to go. She backed into the barn, pulling her brother close. He clung to her, eyes wide. The horse drew nearer, slow and unhurried, as if its rider had no reason to rush. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn hat pulled low over his eyes. He looked like the land itself, rough, weathered, and silent. The sister's mind raced. Is he kind? Is he cruel? Will he help us or turn us in? Every adult she had known had taught her the same lesson: trust no one. Yet something about the way the man rode, steady, calm, unafraid, made her pause. He stopped a short distance away, not reaching for anything, not shouting. He simply watched. For a long moment neither moved. The wind tugged at her hair, her heart thundered in her ears, and the future balanced on a fragile edge. She stood between the man and her brother, shoulders squared despite her fear. Whatever this stranger wanted, he would have to go through her first. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice low and rough, like gravel smoothed by time. You kids lost? The sister swallowed hard. Lost didn't begin to cover it, but she nodded slowly, her grip tightening around her brother's hand. She didn't know it yet. But this moment, this quiet standoff on an empty stretch of land, was the turning point. The unknown path had led them here, to a man who carried his own ghosts and didn't yet know that two frightened children were about to change his life forever. The cowboy waited, unmoving in the saddle, as if he understood that even a single step closer might shatter whatever fragile balance held the moment together. His horse flicked its tail, steam rising faintly from its flanks after the storm. But the man himself seemed carved from the land, solid, patient and quietly watchful. The sister stood her ground, every muscle taut, her body instinctively shielding her brother. She had learned long ago that hesitation invited harm. If this man meant danger, she would see it coming. We're not lost, she said finally, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. We're just going. The cowboy tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. Up close, she could see his face better, lined by sun and wind, eyes a tired gray that held no obvious cruelty, only a deep, weary sadness. He looked older than she expected, not in years, but in weight, as if life had pressed down on him too long. That's usually what lost folks say, he replied gently. He slid from his horse then, slowly, deliberately, keeping his hands where she could see them. The gesture surprised her. No adult had ever cared whether she felt safe before. He took off his hat, holding it against his chest, and for a brief second the world seemed to hold its breath. Her brother shifted behind her, peeking out with wide eyes. The cowboy noticed and softened further, crouching slightly so he wasn't towering over them. I ain't here to hurt you, he said. Name's Eli. The sound of a name, simple, Honest hit her harder than she expected. Names meant humanity. Names meant choices. She didn't offer her own. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered. Are you going to take us back? Her voice cracked on the last word. Back, the place she refused to name, as if speaking it aloud might summon it. Eli's brow furrowed. Back where? He asked. The sister hesitated, then shook her head. Nowhere, she said quickly. Just back. Understanding flickered in his eyes, and something darker followed, anger maybe, or regret. He exhaled slowly, like a man remembering old wounds. No, he said firmly. I don't take kids anywhere they don't want to go. Relief flooded her so fast her knees nearly gave out. She caught herself, gripping her brother's hand tighter. Still, she didn't relax. Trust wasn't given. It was tested. Why are you here? She asked. Eli gestured toward the open land behind him. This is my range, he said. Storm chased some of my cattle off course. He was looking for 'em. He paused, then added softly, Didn't expect to find 2 kids hiding in a barn. Silence settled between them, thick and uncertain. The sister weighed her choices, fear wrestling with instinct. Running now would mean starting over, with her brother even more exhausted. Staying meant risking everything on a stranger's kindness. She hated that the world had reduced her to this kind of decision. Before she could speak, her brother tugged at her sleeve. I'm hungry, he whispered. The words cut through her resolve like a blade. Eli heard it too. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in cloth. He didn't step closer. He just set it on the ground and nudged it toward them with his boot. Bread and dried meat, he said. You can take it. No strings. The sister stared at the food, her heart pounding. It could be a trick. Everything she'd learned told her not to trust gifts. But her brother's eyes were fixed on the bread, like it was a miracle. She made a decision, not for herself, but for him. She took a cautious step forward, then another, snatching the bundle and retreating instantly. Eli didn't move. He just watched as she tore the bread and handed most of it to her brother. The boy ate desperately, crumbs spilling down his chin. Tears burned in her eyes as she watched him. She hadn't realized how close they were to breaking until this moment of simple mercy. Thank you, she said quietly, the words tasting strange and unfamiliar. Eli nodded once, as if accepting something heavier than gratitude. You got a plan? He asked. She shook her head. Just keep going, she said. Saying it aloud made it sound smaller, thinner than it had in her mind. Eli studied her face, the dirt, the exhaustion, the fierce determination. Something shifted in him, subtle but unmistakable. You can rest at my place, he said after a long pause. Just for the night. No obligations. You decide what happens next. Alarm flared in her chest. A place meant walls, rules, expectations. It meant vulnerability. She opened her mouth to refuse, but then she looked at her brother, still chewing, eyes drooping with exhaustion. The storm had taken what little strength they had left. She was out of choices. One night, she said finally, her voice hard with warning. Eli inclined his head. One night, the ride was slow and careful. Eli walked beside the horse at first, letting the children ride together when their legs could no longer carry them. The land stretched endlessly around them, painted gold by the lowering sun. The sister kept waiting for something to go wrong, for him to change, for anger to flash in his eyes. But he remained steady, quiet, pointing out birds and distant hills to her brother, who listened with wonder as if the world were opening up for the first time. When they reached the small ranch house, the sister's breath caught. It wasn't grand, just a modest structure with a porch and a single light glowing warmly in the dusk. To her, it looked like something out of a story. Safety, fragile but real. Eli showed them inside, lighting a fire, handing them blankets. He moved with the practiced ease of someone used to being alone, his silence filled with unspoken memories. That night, as her brother slept deeply for the first time in days, the sister lay awake staring at the ceiling. She didn't know if this man would truly help them. She didn't know if tomorrow would bring new danger. But for the first time since the orphanage, fear loosened its grip just enough for another feeling to slip in. Hope, small, trembling, and terrifying. Outside, the land stretched wide and quiet. And inside that small house, 3 broken souls hovered on the edge of something neither dared name yet. This was not the end of their fear. It was the beginning of their becoming. Morning arrived gently, as if afraid to wake the fragile peace that had settled over the small ranch house. Sunlight slipped through the thin curtains and traced warm lines across the wooden floor. The sister woke with a start, her body tensing in instinctive fear, her mind bracing for shouts, for the crack of a door opening too hard. But none came. Instead, there was only the low crackle of a fire and the distant sound of a kettle beginning to sing. For a moment she lay still, confused by the unfamiliar quiet. Then memory returned. Eli, the horse, the bread, the promise of one night. She turned slowly and saw her brother sleeping beside her on a pallet near the hearth, his face peaceful in a way she had never seen before. No lines of fear carved into his small brow, no tight fists clutched against his chest. The sight stole her breath. Something inside her softened, then tightened painfully, like a wound that had finally been uncovered. She sat up, pulling the blanket closer around him, as if afraid the world might notice her happiness and snatch it away. Eli stood at the stove, his back to them, moving quietly so as not to disturb. He looked different in the daylight, older perhaps, but gentler too. The harsh shadows of the night were gone, replaced by warm tones that made the small house feel almost kind. When he noticed her awake, he didn't speak at first. He simply nodded, a silent greeting that carried respect rather than expectation. "There's coffee," he said after a moment, then hesitated. "And milk, if that's better for the boy." She nodded again, unsure how to respond to kindness offered so simply. He poured a cup of warm milk and set it near her, keeping his distance. She watched him carefully, noting the way he avoided sudden movements, the way he checked the door and windows as if habitually, guarding against something unseen. Her brother stirred, blinking sleepily. When he saw where he was, panic flashed across his face, but then he recognized the warmth, the smell of food, the absence of fear. "Are we safe?" he whispered. The sister hesitated, then answered honestly. "For now," she said. Eli heard the words and nodded once, as if agreeing to a pact he hadn't been asked to make. After breakfast, Eli offered them water to wash and clean clothes that, though worn and faded, were warm and whole. The sister's hands trembled as she accepted them. She had learned to expect a price for everything, but none came. When she finally spoke, her voice was careful, measured. "We'll leave today," she said. "You don't owe us anything." Eli leaned against the table, studying the grain of the wood. "I didn't say you had to," he replied. "Storms come and go. You're welcome to stay till you're ready." Ready? The word echoed in her mind. Ready for what? The road? Hunger? Being hunted? She didn't answer. Instead, she watched as Eli stepped outside to tend to his chores, the rhythm of his movements calm and practiced. The ranch was small but alive, cattle grazing in the distance, a windmill turning slowly, a horse grazing near the fence. It wasn't rich, but it was steady. It was something. As the day unfolded, the sister helped where she could, sweeping the floor, washing dishes, keeping her brother close. She noticed how Eli never raised his voice, never barked orders. When something went wrong, a drop bucket, a stubborn gate, he simply fixed it, muttering softly under his breath. It unsettled her more than anger ever could. She didn't know how to defend herself against patience. By afternoon, her brother began to explore, his laughter hesitant at first, then freer as the hours passed. He chased dust motes in the sunlight, asked endless questions about the animals, and listened wide-eyed as Eli explained how to tell which way a storm was coming by, watching the clouds. The sister watched from the porch, her heart torn between relief and dread. Every smile felt borrowed, temporary. She kept waiting for the moment when Eli would ask questions she couldn't answer, or worse, make promises he couldn't keep. The moment came quietly as the sun dipped low. Eli sat across from her at the table, hands folded. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," he said carefully. "But folks will start asking questions if you stay. I want to make sure you're not in danger." Her chest tightened. She stared at her hands, the scars on her knuckles, the dirt beneath her nails. Telling the truth meant risking everything. Lying meant building on sand. "He hurt us," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "The man who ran the place we came from." Eli's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. He didn't interrupt. She continued, words spilling out in broken pieces. Hunger, fear, nights locked in closets, the constant threat of being separated. She stopped short of the worst parts, shielding her brother even now. When she finished, silence filled the room. Eli stood abruptly, turning away. For a terrifying moment, she thought she had said too much, that he would send them away, afraid of trouble. Instead, he gripped the edge of the counter, shoulders shaking slightly. When he turned back, his eyes were wet, his voice rough. "I won't let anyone take you back there," he said. The certainty in his tone stunned her. No conditions, no hesitation. Via flared again, sharp and urgent. "You don't know us," she said. "You don't owe us anything." Eli met her gaze, something fierce and protective burning there. "I know enough," he replied. "And I owe myself not to walk away again." She didn't ask what he meant by that. Some truths were too heavy for daylight. But as night fell, and they sat together in the quiet glow of the fire, the sister felt something unfamiliar settle over her. Not safety exactly, but the fragile beginning of it. The path that had begun in fear was changing shape, winding toward something dangerous and beautiful all at once. She didn't know yet that the past was already reaching for them, and that loving them would demand more from Eli than he had ever given anyone before. Hoofbeats shattered the morning silence, sharp and furious, tearing through the fragile peace like a blade. The sister was awake instantly, fear flooding her veins before her mind could catch up. She knew that sound. She had dreamed of it. The orphanage owner stood at the edge of the ranch, rage twisting his face, law papers clenched in his fist, shouting accusations into the open air. He called them stolen. He called Eli a criminal. He reached for the children as if they were property. The sister stepped forward, heart pounding, ready to run, to fight, to sacrifice herself if she had to. But Eli moved faster. He placed himself between the man and the children, broad shoulders squared, voice calm but unyielding. He spoke of witnesses, of reports already sent, of bruises documented and doors locked from the outside. He spoke like a man who had prepared, like someone who had decided long before this moment that he would not fail again. The orphanage owner faltered. Fear replaced arrogance. When the sheriff arrived, summoned by Eli at first light, the truth came spilling out. Chains broke. The past lost its grip. When it was over, the sister collapsed to her knees, shaking. Eli knelt beside her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "It's done," he said softly. "You're safe." For the first time, she believed it. Not because she was strong, but because someone else had chosen to be strong for her. That night, as the stars spread wide above the ranch, the brother fell asleep with his head against Eli's chest. The sister watched them, tears finally falling, unashamed. She had walked an unknown path in fear, carrying everything alone. Now she wasn't alone anymore. Eli didn't call himself their father, but from that night on he became one. And the orphan sister and brother, who had once run from darkness, finally found their way home,